Hey guys, so I thought I would create a little how-to video on how to create a Kickstarter clone. So I'm choosing Kickstarter because it's a different project to the ones that are out there, which are commonly like how to create a to-do application, very useful, not a real world case scenario, or how to create Amazon, which has been done a million times, or Facebook. As opposed to all of that, YouTube is pretty complicated, and it's also one of the websites that everyone's pretty familiar with. So I couldn't find any how to do YouTube videos, oh sorry, how to do a Kickstarter clone website myself on YouTube. So I thought I'd give it a go. So this is like the normal Kickstarter site I'm sure everyone's familiar with. My currency is in AU because I'm in Australia, but it's very similar. It's still dollars. So on side of Kickstarter itself, there's a whole bunch of different projects. You can log in with the user functionality. There are blogs, and blogs have authors, which are users, and a whole bunch of projects. And every project has different tier goals that you can do, and every user can create a project, and every project can have multiple users, and each user within a project subscribes to a certain reward amount in that project, which corresponds both to dollars and to the rewards that you will retrieve. At the end, every project must have a minimum amount of funding. It has a time to be funded, and we just track stuff like number of backers and overall funding, etc. So there's a little bit going on with this sort of website, so I thought it'd be a good and a different website to try and create a clone of. So first off, we're going to create this in two sections. Section 1 will be creating the backend APIs and the database about this. And section 2 will be about the front end, so what the user sees, this Kickstarter website itself. So we're going to create it via a REST API. So I've found two different sites with different images about what is a REST API. The first one is from Edureka, if I'm saying that correctly. Sorry, edureka.co blog. What is a REST API? So I thought this picture here was kind of helpful. So a REST API is a way that you can do CRUD operations, which stand for create, read, update, and delete. And each method for CRUD corresponds to a different HTTP method. And of course, HTTPS is just the browser protocol. So if you want to create an application, you will use a post request. If you want to read, you use a get, update, put, and delete different methods. There are a bunch of more HTTP methods, but frankly, they're outdated, and I don't think I even have ever used any apart from these for myself. And this one, crudcrud.com, has a little bit of a better picture explaining what's going on from the application. And this is just symbols for, I think that's Angular, React, Vue, JavaScript. I'm not sure what that one is. And from the application, you can send these different HTTP methods, the post, get, put, delete, which are these ones, which correspond to the CRUD operations that we want to do, to our API endpoint. So it would be, for example, if we want to get all of the projects on Kickstarter so we could display them on the home page, we would send from the application, which we're going to be building in React, a GET request, which is going to be a read operation to /API/projects. And then that endpoint is going to talk to our database, which we're going to be using Mongo. And that's going to give back a response of all the projects. And that will be going back to the application, go, here's all the projects, and then the application will render those projects based on that data on the screen. And that's just a high-level overview of what a API is and what CRUD operations are. So especially as we're going to be building out the back end first, there's not going to be anything to display in the front end. So we're going to be using Postman to simulate different requests. Postman is a cool little tool that you can use to simulate these HTTP methods of post, get, put, and delete. Because by default, if you just go to a website, you're only going to be using the get request. And within the website, you do something like fill in a form and you click submit. In the back end, it will send a post request, but you don't actually see that directly on the website. So Postman is just a way that we can simulate those requests. And it's going to be a little application. It's free. There are a bunch of different applications that do the same thing. Postman, I think, is one of the more common ones, and it's the one I'm going to be using for this video. But if you're used to another one, just feel free to use that. And then lastly, we're going to be using Mongo to store our data in the database. So Mongo, we're going to be using also Compass, which is a desktop application of Mongo, just so we can see it. And again, Mongo has a free tier, so this won't cost you anything. All right, let's get going. So first off, we're going to go to Git, and I'm actually going to use the GitHub desktop. We're just going to create a new repository, and we're going to call it, for example, Kickstarter clone. We're going to give it a clone of Kickstarter. Sorry, I can't spell. And we're actually going to put that inside the YouTube directory. And let's just create it. Alright, cool. Now, inside of this, let's go across and we can go into Visual Studio Code. We can open the folder inside of dev YouTube Kickstarter clone. I've actually got a part 2 already because ironically I recorded part 1 this video already, but for some reason the screen didn't actually share screens. It just did the Chrome browser for the whole time, even though I was typing code for half of it inside the VS Code. So that was a big sad moment. Alright, inside of this Kickstarter clone, we're going to open up the terminal and we're just going to do let's do an npm init. Alright, so package name, Kickstarter clone, sounds good. Version 1, description, clone of the Kickstarter website for YouTube. Entry point of index, test command, git repository. We can do that ourselves. Keywords, author would be me, Nathan O'Donnell. License, is this okay? Yes, let's go. Alright, so we've got our very first package JSON. We're also going to create a git ignore file, and inside here we're going to put our node modules, and we're going to put our .env file. Alright, what else is there? Oh, it can do this, that's fine. Alright, we're going to be using Typescript to build this out, because Typescript is a more robust way of using codes, because it just checks to make sure that, for example, the different types are cool. So we'll do a little demonstration later, but first off, let's just set up the tsconfig.json file, and it's going to be a very basic file with our compiler options of strict, which will be true. And we're going to also throw in use unknown in catch variables of false. When this is applicable, I'll just draw attention to it, but for now we'll just leave it as is as a default. And when it becomes relevant, I'll quickly talk about it. Alright, that looks good. Inside of package JSON, let's have a look. This is what was created for us. Looks pretty good. Alright. Let's install some dependencies. So we're going to npm install. We're going to use colors.ts because we're going to be using Typescript. .env because we have a .env file. We're going to use express async handler, and Mongoose to talk to the database. Alright. We're also going to be doing as a dev dependency. So we just wait for this to install. Here we go. npm install /D for dev dependency at types, and we're going to have the colors type, which we're going to respond to this colors.ts package. We're going to have at types /express, which is the express dependencies. Sorry, the express types. We're also going to have the node mod and ts node. And we're just going to wait for that to install real quick. Alright, so that looks like it's installed fine. Alright, cool. So let's get rid of this script because I actually don't want to test script. Let's do start script, and inside of start we will run node, and we're actually going to go into backend / server.ts. So already, if you can just have a look at this base file, we've got .ignore.get attributes.package.json locks.package.json tsconfig. This is, and we're going to also throw, hang on, let's just do it now, an env file in here. So this is already going to get pretty crowded. I don't actually want to have all of our folders directly on this level because it's already getting a bit crowded. So I'm going to have them inside of a backend folder. And we're going to have a backend because I'm still deciding if I want to have the backend and the front end in one application or have two separate applications for that. So if we have the front end, it'll be inside a / front end folder. If it was purely going to be backend, I'll probably call it something like app, but just to leave us some flexibility, let's call it backend. And if we start it, that'll be cool. And we also want a second one. So if we run a dev script, we want to go, here we go, node backend server TS. And that's going to be a little bit of a difference of Nomon. So Nomon will just continually watch the files into different changes and restart and run itself again, whereas start will just be a once and done sort of situation. And we can demonstrate that real quick if we go to create our backend folder, and inside of that we're going to have our server.ts for Typescript file. And we're just going to have a very basic console log hello world. Hello world. Cool. So I'll just go through a demonstration of that. So we have two terminals here. The first one we're going to run npm run start, which if we go back to the package.json was this start script, node backend server TS, which as I said was just the once and done, so it's already exited and went for the next command. Whereas if we run npm run dev, it's going to run the nomon. So nomon starts up, and then we print hello world, and it's still exited and it's waiting for changes before we restart. So if I go in now and I go, instead of hello world, hello YouTube, and save, you notice that this one, nomon, on dev has run hello YouTube, whereas this one over here is still just printed hello world and it's stopped. It's not going to print hello YouTube unless we call it and start it again. But that's going to get real annoying real fast because we're going to be building this out quite often and we don't want to wait for it and have to manually call it to start over and over again. So I'm actually going to do a bit of a sanity check and just switch them around because I want the server on the left. And on this right one, I think this would be a good time to do a git. And we're just going to say initial setup. You don't have to do git if you don't want. Alright, let's go to git real quick. If I just go in, I thought I'd already set this up. From git, oh no, because we go to publisher repository. Cool, so because we set it up from here, it has a git. Name resist, yep, cool, that's because as I said earlier, I have already created this once, but unfortunately the screen didn't work. So we're going to say Kickstarter clone YouTube. Cool, publish repository. And now it should have done that for me. So I go git push, everything up to date, perfect. And if you notice, everything here is now no longer green and screaming. Everything's nice and white except for these two, which are grey, and they're grey because they're on the git ignore and they're not actually part of git. So we're just going to give you a nice little thing like that. Alright, let's close everything, go back into server. So what do we want for the server? Alright, so first of all, we're going to import everything as express from express. Then we're going to say const app equals express, and we're going to initialize it with app.useExpress.json, so the application itself can use JSON. Pretty standard, nothing too crazy here. And we're going to say app, no, we're going to use const port equals 5000. And then app.listen, we're going to listen on the port, and we're just going to console log. Service started on port 3000. Looks pretty good. And we can get rid of the hello YouTube. Cool. So hello YouTube, service started on port 3000 we've got going on here. Alright, so the first thing is, I don't want this port to be hard-coded here. I actually want to put that as a variable inside the env file. So we're going to go in env and we're going to say port equals, I don't want 5000, I want 3000. And then inside of here, I'm going to say const port equals process.env.port or 5000. And it's still 5000 because it's running here. And that's because we haven't first initialized the .env file. So we're going to say const.env equals require.env, and we're going to call config on that. And all of a sudden, we're going to use it. Actually, I don't think I can need to save that. Yeah, cool. So we just need to require the .env, which we install as part of the package JSON dependencies. We're going to call config to set up our configuration with the .env file itself, and that's going to get the port 3000. Cool. So that's better. That's much, much better, but I still don't like it because if we want to use the process environment and we're going to have another one for our database connection URL, and it's possible we're going to have more. So we're probably also going to have a node environment set up in the .env. So because of that, I actually don't like having it everywhere because it might work and then it might break. And I'd rather if it broke because the env isn't set up properly, it should break at the start. So I'm going to go inside of our backend folder, create a new one. We're going to call it utils. And I'm going to call it config.ts. And inside of config.ts, let's just copy that across. And let's copy this across. And then let's export it. Alright, and then over here, if I just do handy hover and import it, import port from utils config. And that way, I can also, well, let's just note this is still working on 3000, not 5000, but I can also do something like this called node environment equals process.env.node environment, or development by default, export const, I should say. And let's just put a node environment inside here of development. Doesn't actually need that. Cool. And this is just something I like to do because it contains all the environment files in one location, and it means that if something fails because of environment, you know where to look. You're not trying to chase down where it's called for the first time, or perhaps not for the first time, just called for the first time in that run in different locations. Alright, so we've got our server listening on this port. Listening but not really doing anything. So this is just a Postman. Again, I had this set up earlier. You can just restart, I suppose, that's fine. So you go to Postman for the first time, you're just going to have this set up, let's make it full screen. And inside of collections, we're just going to have a new collection. Let's give that a name, we'll call it Kickstarter clone. And inside of Kickstarter clone, we're going to have a bunch of different requests. So the first thing we're going to do is build out the projects. So if we go to our endpoint, it's going to be a localhost of 3000, and we're going to go to API/projects. If a get request, this should get back a list of all the projects. Let's see. So at the moment, it's coming back with a HTML response saying error. We cannot get API projects because if we notice, this is just listening on the port. It's not actually doing anything. There's no routes yet. So we're also just going to figure this out while we're here. Get all not requests, get all projects. And if I used to use Control D, it'll copy the one you're on. So in this one, we're going to create a, I'll just create a project. And it's going to be a post request to that endpoint. And we're going to save it. And then we can get a project. And we're going to have / say 1. And then we can put to update a project, and it's also going to go to a specific project endpoint. Again, we're just getting errors, but we're just going to set this up first. Get put, we're going to delete. So delete a project. That's also going to go to the same endpoint. And we don't actually need this one, so let's remove it. And that's going to be a delete request. Alright, so now we've set up all our endpoints in Postman to simulate different requests with the HTTP methods of, as discussed before. So we've got the get, we've got the post, we've got the get for a single one as opposed to get all of them, update and delete methods, and they're all coming back with this little HTML error page because we don't have any routes set up. So we go over here, let's set up our first route. So if we go app, and we're going to use a get request to, and we say it was API/projects. Let's take in the request and the response, and let's give a response.json object of message to get all projects. Alright, so if we go back to Postman and we bring Postman up and we go get request / projects, instead of that error message, now we're getting back a message of get all projects, which is what we set here. But if we use a post request, we're still getting back that error message, and that's because we haven't yet set up the file. So let's do that now, shall we? So just going to copy them across to be faster. So we do a post request. Here we're going to message of create a project, and if we do a get request to projects :ID, which is something special, we'll do a message of let's change the message of get project and the request params ID. So the request params ID is just something a little bit special. So if we do, just to show you what's going on with this, and then there's also console log request.params. Cool. We'll leave the others for now. So if we go to Postman, if we go, let's get rid of this one, so make this full screen. We go to Postman, and Postman's over here. We do a post request. We're going to get back a message, create a project. We do a get request to a special endpoint, get project 1. And then it's 1 because we've got this up here. So that's just going to map to that. And that's because inside of here, we've got our console log going on here. So this is what's here. So below these stars over here, we're going to show the request.params. And the request params that are coming through is ID of 1543, because that's what we're putting up here. And that ID is called ID because we've done this : /ID. So if we were to change this to nonsense, sorry, it should be a string. Nonsense. Cool. And then we send it. you notice that nonsense comes down here because that's just what we're telling you to expect. We're actually going to use ID because ID is going to be used to access objects by their ID inside the database. And right now, I'll call it ID, but Typescript is smart enough to know that nonsense doesn't exist on this because it already figures out that it's going to be called ID. That's just one of the benefits of TypeScript. So this was just normal JS. This wouldn't pick up the error. We might try to use this and then we'll get crashing logs and we'll try to have to do a bug hunt to figure out why. All right. And then the second thing I wanted to quickly go over was this console log request, which is above this line. And you see that this huge object, if I make it bigger, it's just a huge object that's coming through. And this is all the data that's associated with that single request coming in. It's actually quite a lot. And most of it you don't really need to know too much, although there are a couple of cool things. So we can go through the headers, timeouts, the headers themselves. There's a couple of cool things like here we go, the path name and the path that they're on, and more things that you can get from here. And this is a whole bunch of this. The user agent coming from Postman, host, accept encoding, a whole bunch of stuff. But again, what we're really concerned with right now is just that ID that's coming through. So we can use that ID later in order to get it from the database. So now we've gone over what that ID is. Let's use that ID in a put request to the ID, to the colon ID, and the message is going to be update project at the request ID, and delete is going to go to colon ID, and the message is going to be a delete project ID. Cool. So let's just test those out real quick in Postman. So if we go to all, we get all projects, create a project, create a project, get a project, get a specific project number. If we update a project, we get the right message, and same for delete. Cool. So that's all working. All right, so right now we're going to have to think of the end state of our application. So in the end state of the application, we're going to have a couple of different endpoints. We're going to have all of these endpoints for projects, but we're also going to have all of these endpoints for users. We're going to have all of them for blogs, and we're probably going to have some sort of different way of differentiating different endpoints for when a user creates a project and they want to update the milestones or the different tiers that you can get inside that project. They're all going to have different endpoints. So if we were to copy this quite a lot, it's getting, let's do it once. So that'll be for users, that'll be for blogs, that'll be for the milestones, and it gets quite long. And right now we're just doing a basic response. If we were to go back and we go back to a single one, and inside of this, instead of just do a simple response, so we want to delete, we're going to have to check user is logged in. We're going to have to check user has permission to delete the project. We're going to have to check that project exists. We're going to have to delete the project and then return success message. And then also, if the user is not logged in, we're going to, if not logged in, return error message. If user doesn't have permission, we're going to, if not, return a specific error message, and if not, return error message. And this is going to be more than one line of code, and you can already see that it's taking up more. So the more stuff we're doing, the more different endpoints and across many different objects, this particular file is going to get real big and real messy. So instead of doing that, we're going to break it down a little bit more. So first off, we're going to create different routes. So we're going to go into our backend and we're going to create a routes file. And we're going to have routes for all these different objects. So we're going to have a project routes.ts file. And inside of here, this is where we'll also have those different objects that I was talking about. So we would have a user routes and a blog routes and a milestone routes, or whatever we called it. So let's copy all of this inside of the routes. Alright, and then we're going to say const routes equals routes, sorry, no, const routes const express equals require express, const routes equals express.router. Okay, and instead of this app, we're going to have it as routes. And we're going to export routes. Export default routes. Cool. Alright, so inside here, we're also getting some TypeScript errors that we weren't getting before. So these TypeScript errors are just saying that we don't know what request and response are because they're any type by implicit, and we actually want them to be of a specific type. So I'm just going to take care of that right now. And when we do this, we're going to import response and request from Express. And this request object is going to be of a request type. And same for this response. This response is going to be of type response. I'm just going to copy that across for all of them. All right, awesome. And then inside of this, instead of that, we're going to say app dot use at /API /routes. Here we go. So if we go to /API /routes, then don't worry about this file anymore. Just go into this routes file and look here. So this is actually going to fail because well, it's not even running. Express router. Alright, let's restart that. Alright, notice something I've done recently. Throw new error router.use requires a middle. Document a ++ type router.use. Alright, so I just had to quickly go find out that error. Silly me, I had done this as a export default routes, but instead it needs to be a module.exports equals routes, and then they will run properly. So as I was about to mention, inside of our server we've got use the API projects, and then look inside the routes, and we've got API projects here. So if we go here, we're actually going to get an error message because we cannot get API projects because we've double chained it. So if instead we went API projects, we'll get the right response. But that's really not what we want to do. So that's just if, for example, we had a front end all in the same file, and we would say, /projects, go to the front end sort of route, and if we went /API, then we might have all of these API routes within this own top level, and then within our API we'll branch off to projects or anything else, and just get it more modularized. But we're not going to do that. So if we just go to the base URL, which is again going to be our localhost 3000 /API/projects/nothing, then we're going to get it. Okay, now let's go to Postman and test out. So that's correct because we're no longer going there, we're now going here. And run through all of these again real quick. Alright, so that seems to have worked, and we're broken it down. So now our server file is only a one-liner, and our project's routes file has a couple more. So I'm going to take the chance to quickly do another git. Let's call it routes created. And now we've done a git save. Alright. So once again, if we were to use all of our routes, and as I had before, like when we do the delete, we have a couple of different delete methods, it would get quite chunky quite quickly inside of here. So we can break this down a little bit further. So inside of backend, we can create a new folder, and we can go controllers. And inside of controllers, we can have project controllers .ts. And inside the project controller, we can actually take all of the logic that we've got here regarding this into there. So let's take this and we just cut it, and let's go over here. So let's go paste, and we'll say that is get projects. All right. Alright, so we come over here and we just do a cut of all of that, and we go over here and let's call it a get projects method, and we just paste it. Alright, so we're also going to want to copy this across because we're using it here, and we get an error message, but as soon as we paste it in, we don't actually get one. So before the response object was this response type, but before I pasted that in, it's not really sure what that response is. After I paste it in, see how the Typescript changes, so it knows to expect a JSON object. We're also going to have a status, and we're going to give it a status of 200, which means request success. And then inside, sorry, at the bottom of this, we're going to have module.exports equals, and we're going to have an array, object of get projects. Cool. So when we go here, we can call get projects. And /controller/project controllers. Sorry, that's because we're using the module export syntax and we're going to have to require over here. So const this equals require and same path. Cool. So we've only done it for the get all of them, but if we go here and we do it, it's still working the same. So now we can do it for all of them. And if I do this, and maybe shut that, we can do it just a little bit faster. Const create project equals that, const get project, and this is actually a little bit faster if it doesn't break off. Alright, and project. Alright, we notice that all of this is the same. I've just used some extensions to copy the code across and write it faster. So now we're not just doing get projects, we're also going to get project, create project. That seems to be a pain. Alright. So we do a post method here, we're going to create a project. If we do a get method, we're going to go and get the project. If we do a put method, we're going to update the project. And delete method is going to be delete the project. Okay. And run through Postman once more. Everything seems to be working. Cool. Everything's working just as expected. We no longer need these imports here. And we can do a little bit more on this as well. So because we're using the same URL endpoint, we can actually do something a little bit funky. So we can go, I'm calling it routes. I'd rather call it router. That's my mistake. Router. Probably should have found and replaced that, but whatever. So router dot if the route is / and it is a get request, then we can use get projects, and if it is a post request, we can use create projects, which is these two using the same route, and these are the different methods that map across. So that means we can delete those, and then all of this, perfect, pre-fills. If we go to the ID, we can, with a get request, we usually get a project. Same for put, update, and delete. So that means we can delete this. And then once more, make sure everything is still working. And nothing got broken along the way. Okay, wonderful. The last thing that we kind of want to do is just tie this up a little bit. So at the moment, if I come into here and I want to change what's going on here, I'm actually not too sure what route it is because it's been separated so that every file is a bit smaller, but it means that I no longer know what's going on over here. So I'm going to use a method that I was taught when learning. I think it came from Brad at Travis Media, so I thought I'd link to his videos if you want. But it just means that at the start of all of this, you can use a description, and we're going to get all projects. So that's just going to describe what this route is doing. and the route itself is get API slash, we're not using v1, API slash projects, and it is going to be at a access of public because we want people to get all the projects even if they're not logged in. And that'll be just fine because you don't have to log in to see the projects. So if we want to create a new project, we're going to do a post request, and it's going to be a private route because you have to be logged in order to create a new project. You can't just let anyone do that. And we're going to have a get a project by ID. Yep, that's the right route, and it's public. Perfect. And delete a project by ID, route delete, and private. Cool. And description update, route is put, yep, and private. Perfect. So this just isn't necessary per se, but it's just something helpful I like to do in this controller file just to let me know what's going on. Alright, so we don't actually need the routes file anymore, but before we do, let's do a new git, and let's call it created routes. Alright, cool. So when we go through these routes and we do things, we're going to want to check. So I sort of went through this before. So for example, when we delete a project, we're going to have to check that there's a user, that they're logged in, that they're the right user, that there's something to delete. And depending on all of this, we return different responses back. And some of those responses will be good, some of them will be an error message. We've done a status code here, which when we go by default, 200 OK, but we can manually set that, and we kind of want to do that. So for the first one, it makes sort of sense to do a create route because we want to create a project first so that we can use methods like delete and access and get and update, later. So inside of this, we're going to check the the request body has to have a title because we want our projects to have a title. And if there is no title, then we kind of want to do a res.status of 400 error, and we want to do JSON message title is required, otherwise res.status of 200 or rather 201 successfully created, JSON message create a project. Cool. So inside of our Postman now, we go to create a project, and let's make it larger. So if we send it here, alright, cool, message title is required. So we can do this a couple of different ways. We could send it as a parameter, we could send it in the header, we could send it in the body. So we're going to do it as a body, and we're going to go raw JSON, and this is because when we do the front end, we're going to have a form for you to fill in order to create a new project, and that form is going to store it all as a JSON object, and it's just going to send it to you as JSON. So it makes sense to just test it as JSON because that's what I know I'm going to end up using. So we're going to require a title of my first title. Let's call it my first project. That makes a little bit more sense. Cool. Message, create a project. Perfect. We're no longer getting that error message. And if we go back, that's what we want. Also, if we delete it again, we're going to get that 400 bad requests coming through instead of that 201 created as opposed to 200 OK. So they're just the inbuilt different methods, and we can set them manually with 201, 200. But for example, we can also make a mistake and go, okay, if it's successful, return a 400 message. And we go 400 bad requests, but we actually did it right. So that's just worth to double check and make sure that you're using the right response status codes when we do this. Alright, so I'm getting back a response. Message title is required, but just for the sake of sanity and helping me debug in the future, I'm going to go one step further and use, instead of this JSON message thing, I'm going to have a nice error, and we can use a inbuilt error that comes with Express, and it's just called throwing new error. Title is required. Perfect. So now if we go over, instead of title is required, we get this error page, HTML object with error title is required, and then we get this sort of snippet, which if you read it is kind of helpful, because it goes, okay, inside the Kickstarter backend controllers, project controllers, Typescript file 16 to 15, we got this error. So 16 to 15 is exactly here, and that's the error. So that's kind of helpful, but it's in a weird format, and I really don't like this format. Also, when this is a live website, I don't really want them to know the location is coming from. It's cool for developing, but not so much otherwise. So that's going to require us to set up our own error handler and just sort of override it. So that's not too bad, we can do that. Inside of, let's call it a middleware, because that's what it's going to be. It's going to be in the middle between our application and React. So let's go backend, create a middleware folder, and we're going to call it error middleware.ts. Alright, so we're going to do export of an error handler, and we're going to take error request response next. Yep, they're the different methods we want, except we also want one more thing. So if you notice, TypeScript's already throwing me errors because it doesn't know what type these are. It's just implicitly any type. But we already know what types that they can be. So if we can import next function, response and requests. And we're already seeing response and request before inside the controllers coming from Express as types. And that's just what these are going to be, real quick. And request. And next is the next. Alright. But this error is actually going to be something different, because we can create our own error. And we're going to pass in, for our error, the status code, which is what we're setting here, the status or the status code, whatever you want to call it, and we're going to pass in our error message. So we're going to have to create our own. Let's put it inside of, it's not really a middleware, it's more a util. Yeah, let's put it inside of util, and we're going to call it http exception.ts, and we're going to create it, and it's going to be inside of a class, and we're going to call it http exception, and it's going to extend the default error message that comes with Express, because that's what we were talking about before. We're just going to change the error message. It's suggesting me a prefill, but I don't like that prefill because that's not what we want. We want a status, which is going to be optional, of a number, a message of string, and error, which is going to be a string or null, and looks like I missed a semicolon. Cool, that's fine. We're going to constructor, perfect. Message of string, which is what we've got here. Error, string of null, status, number, so just copy that across, okay. We're going to super this message, because we're going to call it message first. And this dot status equals status, this dot message equals message, and this dot error equals the error that we pass in, or it's going to be null. I'm just going to close that off. Why doesn't it work? Oh, because I haven't done that correctly. Okay, cool. So to recap what we're doing, we've got a new error here that comes with Express by default, and it takes in string or undefined, but we're going to combine them and go, let's create our own error class. And this is what this is, HTTP exception. we're going to extend the error class, and it's going to have a status, a message, and error. And we're just going to construct it for status is equal to the status that we give it. Message, error can be the error that we tell it, or it can be a null error. That's all good. So we're going to have this HTTP exception, and that's going to be in this error instead of the default error class that we could use. We're going to have our own error class that we just created, and we're going to import that from the utils HTTP exception file that was just done over here. Okay. I hope that was not too bad to follow along with. It should make more sense as we use it now. So we're going to say const of status equals error dot status. If we don't pass in an error code, we're going to have a 500 status, which means it's a server error instead of an error that we set. And we're going to have a message equals the error message that we passed along, or just something that went wrong. And this will sort of cover us because we can call our own errors, so like, yeah, there's a 400 error, not authorized, or bad request, or whatever it is, like, yeah, cool, title required. But if the error isn't something that we've accounted for, here we go, just something went wrong in the server, not something that we've accounted for. And then we're going to go res.status with the status code. Sorry, not status code, status. Maybe we should call it status code. Nah, it's fine. JSON. And inside of JSON, we're going to pass the message to be the message. Cool. We're also going to go if the stack. So, if the stack, no. If node environment is equal to production, then we want null, otherwise we want the error stack. And we have to import this node environment from the utils that we set before, which is where we get everything from the environment variables.env file. So, if the node environment is production, return null in this stuff, so it'll be message stack null. But if it's not in a production environment, aka we're in a development environment, or we're in a testing environment or something else, then we want the error stack. The error stack is what we just saw here, how it sort of told us what file and what lines went wrong, so we can trace it ourselves. And there's one more thing that we have to use this, because we've created this error middleware, but we're not actually using it yet anywhere. So we're going to go to the root server file, and after the routes, but before we're listening, we're going to go app.use our error handler, which is this one, and it's going to bring in the import for me from up here automatically. All right. So with that in mind, if I do this request now, it's no longer a HTTP page we get with all those weird things. We now have a message title is required, which we had before, and a stack trace, which is okay because we're in development, but if we were in production, this would be null. And the stack trace is error tiles required at create project at the file path .typescript 16 to 15, and that looks a bit more nicer, and it's not a HTTP page. So that's why we went through all that effort to create that new error, and that just overrides the default error. So that looks much nicer, and we're also getting the 500 internal error. Awesome. So all that's left is, let's do a get again. Created error handler. Alright, let's fill this out now. So, what are we doing? We're doing the controllers, and we've just done the create if there's no title, because this only has to be a title. Yep, if there's no title, throw in error. Otherwise, we're just sending the JSON object back. That's fine. So we don't need anything inside the project. Sorry, the get projects, but we do need something inside the get project. So inside of the get project, No, we don't actually need anything inside this. We need it if we have a database. So that's the next thing we're going to do. Instead of just respond with this hard-coded JSON messages, let's go and actually have our database. So if we go back to our database, we go to Mongo. I'm actually going to open up Mongo client. And again, I've already done a couple of these. So let's do a new connection. We go to Mongo, let's get started. I have an account to sign in, but you can just create a new account if you don't already have one. And this is just the Mongo database website. So I'm going to sign in. I'm going to sign in with Git. So you can sign in. I'm going to edit that out because I don't want you to see my personal address. So alright, so we're just going to go in, and if you don't already have a project, just click the down arrow and it'll be like create a new project. We're going to create a project. We're going to give it a cluster, which is the database itself. The shared one is the free one. If you were to use dedicated, it'll cost 75 cents an hour, which is, you know, $500 a month, US, of course. And then serverless is the better one that'll scale for you. You can choose your provider. We're just going to use AWS and choose your own region. I'm in Sydney AP Southeast 2 region because I'm in Australia, and we can just go create a cluster. So you just go to create a new project, and let's call it Kickstarter clone. Let's create the project. All right, we don't need to create anyone. Actually, fuck. All right, so from the Mongo compass that we've opened, we can go here on the right, create a free cluster. That will open up this Mongo database website. You just get started, or sign in or create an account if you already have one. It's free. I'm just going to sign in with my email. And inside of here, let's go. I've already created a database, a project. But if you don't have a project, just click this down arrow and then create a project. I'm going to build a database on this project. We're going to do the free one. Free tier, AWS. I'm in the Australia region, so Sydney AP Southeast 2. Pick whichever one's closest to you. And then we go create, and this is important. So when we go here, let's use a username. So I'm going to go Nathan O'Donnell. Let's do our auto-gen password, copy that password. inside our .env, I'm just going to paste that real quick. And then don't forget to save the create user. And that's created my Nathan user with that password. Don't worry about the password, I will be changing that before this goes live. So inside of the AP address, I'm going to have 0.0.0.0, which means anywhere. You can have your current IP address if you want. Finish and save. Let's go. Just got to wait for it to deploy. And then if we wanted to connect to it with Compass, let's copy this and go to Compass. And there's just a couple of things we want to do here. So we want to change this test to this name of Kickstarter clone, because that's what I called it over here. And if I go to the env, I'm going to copy that, and instead of this password, we're going to paste in the password. Save and connect, we're going to save blue. Blue's a pretty good color. We're going to call it Kickstarter clone, and we're going to go save and connect. Okay, cool. So now we're connected to a database, and let's save it as Mongo Yuri equals here. Alright, and now we've got a database with Mongo, we're connected to it, and we're saved in the environment variables. That's looking pretty good so far. So whenever we add an environment variable, I'm going to go to this file. This is where I want all the environment variables to come into. So export const Mongo Yuri equals process.env.mongo Yuri or null. Because unlike these ports and development, if we don't actually have a Mongo Yuri in the environment, there's nothing I can do. You can't just fake a Mongo connection. Alright. So now let's set up a way to talk to the database. So inside of the backend folder, let's create a new folder, and we call it database. And inside of database, we'll have a db.ts file. And inside of here, we can import Mongoose from Mongoose. And we can import the Mongo Yuri from utils config that we just set up. Perfect. Export const of connect the database. It's going to be an async, yep. And if, we're going to check first, if no Mongo Yuri, then we're going to throw a new error, Mongo Yuri must be defined. And no, let's console log instead Mongo Yuri is not defined in the env file, and this is where we can do process.exit1, which means you just exit gracefully at the stage, and then we can try, we want some of this, but not all of it. Await Mongoose connect with Yuri, and then we're going to console log Mongo connected, try catch error, console.log error.message, and then process.exit1. Cool. So there's a couple of things to unpack. If there's no Mongo Yuri, aka if there is null, then just console log that is not defined in the environment variable and exit the process, stop trying. Because without the Mongo database, there's no real point to continuing this. Otherwise, we're going to do a try catch. We're trying to try to connect to it with that Mongo Yuri, and then if we succeed, we're going to just log a message, and then if we fail, we're going to log the error message and we're going to exit. Alright, so this error is the whole reason that in tsconfig earlier we used useUnknown in catch variable of false, because it's working. Actually, before we do that, let's go. Did I export that? Yes. let's go into the server, and inside of the server, we're going to connect to it before the application runs. Because inside the application, we're going to need it. So we're going to go boom, and it's going to import it for me, and it's actually a function, so let's call it. And now we're watching MongoDB connected. All right, cool. If, however, inside tsconfig, we comment this out, we're going to app crash because inside of here, when we console log the error is of an unknown type. And because it's an unknown type, we're not sure that we can use a .message on it. I'm not actually sure what type we can do it because it's an unknown type. If we knew about the error, we'd create our specific error message or an error handler, or we'll do another try catch block, we'll do something because we know what the error is. But because it's an unknown error, we're not sure how to handle it, which is why it's in the try catch block. And Typescript just won't let me continue without it. So if you know a better way to go about it than use this use unknown in catch variables false option in the tsconfig, please let me know in the comments. I'd love to learn, but otherwise that's just the way we have to go. Alright, so while we're here, we also remember way back at the beginning we installed colors.ts. So that means that now inside of server, let's use this because inside of the database, when we connect to the database, instead of this like dull message, I kind of want a nice message, particularly if there's an error. If there's an error, I want it to be red, and I want it to be underlined, and I want it to be bold. And same for it's an error, and then here instead of red, let's go blue. I like blue. You notice that it's throwing errors because it's like red does not exist on this string, which makes sense. But we've got a package to do that. We just need to use the package. So inside of this original server file, we're going to import everything as colors from the colors.ts, and then still getting the same error until we do colors.colors, and we're just going to do this. I actually have no idea why this works. And it's still... Hang on one sec. I said I have no idea why it works, and it's breaking. But it's working here. Interesting. Just because I'm doing this when I should be doing it here. Okay, cool. So if you notice, this colors.colors is actually a function on color that's pretty much equivalent to saying print, trying to get it to pop up. Colors.colors, here we go. So the first argument is the color of a string or a couple of strings, and then the value that's supposed to print. So it's supposed to be something like red hello world, and it's supposed to print hello world as a red message, but it doesn't. And you don't actually need any values in it, and it'll work. But if you don't have this called once, it'll just fail. So not sure why that's required, but that's the way it's required to get it to work. And honestly, okay, as long as it works, I'm not going to question too hard about it. So now we've got a database set up. Let's do another git Mongo database connection connected, and let's do a push. Okay, cool. So inside of our request, and I'm just going to use Control K plus Control W. I always think of it as kill windows, kill all open windows, and it just shuts everything that's open, all the open tabs. So inside of our controllers, when we do our description routes and we go get projects, instead of this hard-coded JSON response, we're going to actually use a proper response. So we're going to go and look at all the projects that are in the database and then return them. So it will be const projects equals, we're going to await project.find. So a couple of things to unpack from here. So projects is what we're going to be returning inside this JSON. And we're going to have to await it because we're looking up the database, and that means that we're going to have to use async. And when we use an async with Express, originally, once again, inside the package JSON, we install this Express async handler. So let's bring that in now. So import, const async handler equals require, and just the value I pasted earlier, Express async handler. Cool. So this is going to be a little bit weird, but we're going to go async handler, wrap async around the whole thing. Let's just comment that out real quick. Message, nothing, and we do that. So async handler async goes at the start, and then we need to put an end bracket. And let's do it for all of them now, so we don't have to do it later. Cool. So that's made it all async. And then if we do project.find, so project.find is going to be our Mongo method because we're going to talk to the database about finding within the project model all the projects associated with that. But first we have to create the model for the database to actually know what we're working with. So once more, let's create a new folder and we're going to call it models. And inside of models, we're going to create the project model.ts file. And we're going to go mongoose, const mongoose equals require mongoose. And that's how this application is going to talk to the Mongo database through Mongoose. And we're going to go const project schema equals mongoose dot schema, and this mongoose schema is going to have, we're going to have a title. That's what we've been using so far. And we're just going to tell it basically a little bit very similar to Typescript that we've been using. We're going to tell it what to expect within the title. We're going to say, it's a string. You could have a boolean or a number or a couple of other different options here, but we're going to say it's a string. It is definitely required true, and it's also going to be unique true. So for our project at least, you must have a unique title. Right, and then after this, we're also going to throw in an extra argument here of timestamps true. So timestamps true will just put out, create out, update it out. So timestamps, you can do it yourself manually, but I don't see why you ever would. You just throw in this argument and Mongo will do it for you. And at the bottom, we're going to go module.exports equals. So this is what we normally default, just the Mongoose model, and we're going to give it a name. We're going to call it project, and that's because in the site project controller, we're going to go project.find. Just going to tell it the name of the actual schema we're talking, and then we throw in the schema next to it as a second argument. But instead of that, we're actually going to go one step further and go, we're actually going to export the Mongoose models with the name of project or the Mongoose model with project schema. So this one is what's going to create the project model within Mongoose, and we're going to say this project model looks like this schema. But instead of exporting that, we're going to first check to see if there's already a project model. Because if there is one, we don't want to create a new one. So I have run into errors in the past where if I didn't throw this sort of argument in first, it was always trying to create a new project schema. It's like, oh, look, we already have a project model in the database, and you want me to create a new one with the same name, and it's getting conflicted, and I'm not sure why, but I just throw into errors. So this just makes it a little bit less error prone for me. All right. So now we have this database model set up. We can go back to our project controller, and inside our project controller, let's uncomment this, and then we're going to wait project.find. And let's say no, he won't do it nice for us. But that's okay. We can go const project equals require. We're going to go to the models file and the project model. Perfect. And we're going to respond this here. And let's see if this works now. So inside our GET request to API projects, here we go, empty array. So that's what, believe it or not, that's actually working. We're getting back an empty array because the project that we're returning is all the projects in the database, and we haven't created a single project yet. So all the projects in the database are null. We don't have a project yet. So next thing, let's create a project. So we're going to say, still must have a body title because we've said title is required. So if we don't have a title, there's an error. So we're going to say const project is await project.create with the request.body, because the request.body is where the title field is in when we throw it. And then we're just going to do a little bit of checking. If there's no project, so for some reason it was an error, we're going to have res.status of 400, and we're going to say throw new error, project not created. Otherwise, we're going to turn a 201 status, and the JSON message is just going to be the project that was created. Cool. So let's use our new method now. If we go here, title is required, that's fine because we got rid of it. So let's put our title in. Title of my first project. Send it. Cool. So here we go. The title is my first project, which is what we've done here. And then it's given us this underscore ID field with a random string, which is Mongo's way of just separating with a unique identifier. Then because we did the timestamps true inside the model, we've got this created at UTC timestamp date and then updated at UTC timestamp date and the underscore underscore V. Honestly, not sure what this underscore underscore V is. If anyone knows, just throw me a comment in the comments below, will you? I would actually like to know what that is. Never mind though. That means that we've done this, and that means if we go back to get all projects, we have an array with our first one in the database. Awesome. If we send a second one, here we go, we're getting a message of duplicate key error collection inside of Kickstarter clones.projects title 1 duck duplicate key title of my first project, because I said it has to be unique and we're trying to create the same one. But if we call it my second project, that'll work. And then if we go back to all projects, we had 2 projects, not 3, because we didn't create the second one because it had to be unique. Okay, that looks like it's working fine for us. So now let's move on and let's go for this one. This is the get a single project. So we're going to say const project equals await project find by ID, request params ID, which is project find by ID is an inbuilt Mongoose method. And then we're going to say if there's no project, then res.status of 404, page not found, yeah, it's fine, throw an error, project not found. Perfect. Should probably update that to 404 too. No 400. I'm not sure that should be 400 or 404. Right. But anyway, otherwise we want to return with a status of 200 all good.json with the project that we found. And if we want to delete a project, we're going to go const project equals we're not going to find, well, yeah, find by ID, or find by ID and delete. And then if there's no project, we return with stats 404, project not found. Otherwise return project ID deleted. You can also throw project as a project. That'll be okay. And let's throw in a status and we'll just say status of 200 dot. Yes, res status 200 JSON message. The project of the ID was deleted and the project of the project that was deleted. That's okay. Let's try that out now. So get our projects. This is the ID. We create a new project. We can get a project. Alright, so we've got a new error message. Cast to object ID failed for value, blah, blah, blah. It's a 500 error because we haven't done anything for it. Okay. So let's try to see if it works properly for the first value. So this is the ID that we get back from Mongo. So we have to actually look up via that ID at this point. And if you do, that gets back correctly. And if we were to change this from like a D to a T, we get back, oh, let's do an E, project not found. This is the project not found error that we set for, where are we? Inside a get a project by ID, 404 project not found. But if we change it back to that 5 or something, what was it, T that was the error? Yeah, T. Or if we get back like a whole bunch of nonsense, this error is actually Mongo saying, hey look, I know you want to find by this ID, but I know that this ID is an invalid ID. Therefore, I'm not even going to attempt to find it. And because I don't attempt to find it, I'm not actually going to receive the project not found error because I'm throwing a new error before I return it. So let's just check for that before we go ahead. So we're going to say if Mongoose, well, sorry, if it's not a Mongoose, dot types dot object ID dot is valid. So if Mongoose dot types dot object ID is this thing here, and Mongoose types is the type so it knows how it looks, is valid of request params ID. So if the request params ID, which is what we're using to look up the Mongo database, is not valid because of this thing, then we want to do something else. We want res status 400. We're going to say throw new error, invalid ID. No, that sounds a little bit confusing. Let's go in ticks. Yeah, request params ID is not a valid ID. And then close that off. Awesome. That's going to be the same for when we do a delete and get. Cool. So that's going to be the same. Not if we create or get, because we're not using ID, but if we use the ID for a get request or a delete request or an update put request, that's going to be an issue. Let's just finish off this update method too. So we're going to go, it is const project equals await find by ID and update. So const project equals await project find by ID and update, and we're finding by ID of the ID, that's normal, and then request body. So inside the request body there needs to be what we're updating it with. So we can do a similar check to when we create it. So if we want to update this project, we have to pass in an update value. If there's no update value, we're not even going to call Mongo. So we're going to use that as the very first one. So in the update, you have to pass in the title that you want to be updated. And then we're going to use that request body with the title to update what we find. And then we're going to return this project straight away. And then if there's no project, we'll do a res status 400, throw an error, project not found. That looks fairly standard. Cool. So, update. Database down. I've done a Typescript error somewhere probably. Scroll all the way down the bottom. If no Mongoose. No Mongoose. Have I required Mongoose in here? No. const mongoose equals require mongoose. What have I? Okay. Okay, cool. Now that we import from Express. So I just want to separate so it's a little logical. Third-party applications, our own. Const import. Okay, I want to import first. That's just me being pedantic. Don't worry about it. Cool. Everything's working as expected. Title is required. Perfect. So inside of this, we're going to say title to be updated title, and one is not a valid ID. Perfect. So we go back to everything. Let's get a valid ID. We're going to go here and go cool. So my first project. So interesting. My first project, but we're trying to say it's an updated ID. So is that not working? Well, let's have a look. Inside get all projects, it's actually updated it to the updated title. And if we do this again, it's going back to the updated title. But if we go updated new title, we still go back to the old value. And that's because inside our update method over here, we've done find by ID and update. So we've found by the ID, we told it how to update, and then we found it and we're returning it. We're not actually waiting for the ID to be updated before we return it. And to do that, we just need to pass in this extra parameter of new true. And that means that we're going to await the new object that's going to be created before we return. So let's do new updated title, and instantly it's there. And that's just because of this little line here. Okay. Well, that's taken us pretty far. So we've learned how to use Typescript Express API. We've connected with Mongo. We've got our own custom error handler. We've done our routes. We've done our controllers. We've got a little bit of color going on in the terminal, and we've got no mod going. I think this is a pretty good start, guys. So I'm going to end it off here. Thanks for watching. Please like and subscribe. Let me know in the comments below if there's anything in particular you'd like me to cover. If you have any comments for me, I'd love to hear them. Otherwise, see you guys next time. Thanks for watching.